Hi.
Hello.
Um, so, uh, my name is Brian Lawson for anybody who is watching right now. And I'm a dancer and a dance educator. And this is the project that I've taken on most recently, Teachers Talk. I am pretty fascinated by dance education and how to do it well. And so in an attempt to try to understand that a little bit better, I've enlisted some dance teachers to come and have conversations with me about the challenges that they face as educators and sort of their story and their personal history and how that informs their teaching. So here we go today with my fabulous guest, Natasha Poon-Woo. Hi,
Thanks for having
Tash.
me. Hi.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Can you introduce yourselves? Introduce yourself.
myself, myself's plural. Um, Hello, I'm Natasha Poonwoo. My main thing that I do currently is working with Canadian Contemporary Dance Theatre, which is a company for young performing artists in Toronto. As the Associate Artistic Director of the company, I've been in that position for just a little over a year now and have been the rehearsal director for the company since 2012. So that is kind of my primary role, I would say, as a dance artist these days. And in addition to that, I guest teach and perform freelance with various choreographers in different projects, and mostly in Toronto.
Nice, nice. So yeah, Natasha and I grew up together in Toronto, and if anyone's watching, I'm showing my Ontario pride today with my Trillium t-shirt. Yeah.
Canada.
So yeah, so we share a history.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. We share a lot of our history, and a big part of that is because at a certain point I just started following you around.
um, but this is not about me today. This is about you.
Okay.
So you grew up in Toronto,
Mhm.
and can you tell me a little bit about how art was a part of your life as a child? Were you always expressive? Were you an artistic kid?
Mhm. Yeah, I was born and raised in Toronto, and I was talking to my mom about this kind of recently because I asked her how she decided to put me into dance classes because your parents dictate a lot of what you do as a child,
Hmm.
and how she found CCDT because I did dance at CCDT as a kid myself. And she actually said that, well, what she said was that she always knew that she wanted us, my three siblings and I, to have artistic pursuits. And she knew that she wanted us to have experiences in music and in dance and in all these things because it was something that she felt was really important as a mother and as a youth educator that her kids experience. So yeah, I think growing up, there was always, we listened to a ton of children's music, which I
Mm.
feel like is really, I don't know if that's off trend these days with parenting, but like I loved it. Like we listened to a ton of Sharon Lois and Bram, and we watched a lot of
Mm.
like educational television, like Sesame Street, and I really enjoyed that, and especially because I have two younger siblings and a million younger cousins, I was just very involved in like arts for children for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved doing arts and crafts, and I started playing piano when I was 6. Which, fun fact, the first year I played the piano, I won the Most Improved Student Award at the recital. And then the next year, I started taking dance classes more seriously, and I stopped practicing piano. And my mom said that my teacher was like devastated. Like I
Oh
was
wow.
such a good piano student, and then as soon as I started dancing more, I was like, I don't care about piano.
Wow. Okay.
I mean,
So
which is which
so
is
you
like
started dancing at 7?
I think I was dancing before that. I started
Okay.
dancing, I actually don't know. I was probably 4 or 5, and I took
Okay.
a class at CCDT, which we still have, which is called Creative Movement,
Hmm.
which starts at age 3, and it's very kind of imagination play-based movement. There isn't a lot of choreography. There's like a little bit of learning simple steps, but it's focusing on musicality, on imagination, on inventive, on creative movement. So
Yeah.
I think that that is the main thing I started with. My mom probably, I should probably ask her, she would remember better than me. But I was dancing young.
And what do you think it was about dancing in comparison, or in comparison to piano, that really captured your imagination more, or that really got you going?
Hmm, I'm not sure. I think I always loved movement. I remember at my parents at the main house I grew up in until I was 12 that they had their wardrobe in their bedroom was across from the bed and was just completely mirrored. And I would just
Mm.
go in there by myself and dance in front of the mirror. But like knowing like no one knew I was doing it, like I just did it for
Yes,
myself. And
right.
I I don't know. There was just something about it. Also, I like attention a lot, which anyone who knows me knows that. I like
Disclaimer, just put it right out there.
disclaimer, double meaning. I yeah, so I think like I liked being given a challenge and being able to like accomplish something and do it well. I
Mhm.
liked being I'm very competitive. I liked being in a class of people and like being able to like do things right and like understand
Mm.
and I don't know. This is kind of this could possibly be a sad memory, but my mom says that she remembers when I started to take more dance classes. It made her a little bit sad because she said whenever I came home, I actually did like creative improvisation dancing less and I just practiced my steps more because I
Mm.
wanted to
Mm.
practice the things I was learning in class.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. That's an interesting question because I definitely love music and I regret that I didn't stay with music in a more intensive, studied way for longer.
Yeah.
And I appreciate musicality in dance like so much. It's probably, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but musicality is like a really key component of the way I teach and something that I really, really try to emphasize. And I think is often not emphasized enough in
Yeah.
dance education. And I've been told since I was a kid, I was told by a lot of teachers that I was naturally quite musical. And I'm sure that part of
Hmm.
that was also really helped by the fact that I did study music for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you can pull me
So
back. I feel like I'm going off on tangents like
no, 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 you're great. I'm thinking about the fact that you and I both have parents who are teachers. And we actually both now teach and love talking about teaching. I'm wondering if you've thought about how your parents' roles as teachers possibly influenced you.
mm-hmm. I yeah, I think I think that my siblings and I all have a natural inclination to teach. I think
Hmm.
we all enjoy it. I think I knew from a pretty young age, I think before even I really considered dance as a career, I always wanted to be a teacher.
Mm.
And I remember jumping ahead to in Canada in grade 10, for all the Americans out there listening, you have to take a course called Careers. From what I
Mm.
remember, it's kind of not super helpful, but I remember that we had to do an online quiz where you answer all these questions, multiple choice questions,
Hmm.
and they tell you which careers you'd be best suited for. And I remember doing it, and the top two I got were elementary school teacher and high school teacher. And then I
Wow.
went back and changed all my answers so the dancer would be first. But
Well, you
I
kind of
mean,
worked it out to get both, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah. I think I love teaching. I guess I didn't know a ton about what my dad was doing in terms of him being a school teacher and teaching phys ed. Like I didn't see or hear about a lot of that in the actual context of his work, but he was constantly teaching and coaching us and
Right.
imparting things on us. But the funny thing is that my dad said that I got to a certain age where I hated it. Like anytime I felt that he was trying to
Mm.
teach us something, I would just like leave and
Mm.
be like, stop trying to teach us. Like stop trying to coach me on how to like putt the ball at mini golf. Like I can figure it out myself.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting that your dad actually taught movement. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is another side story, but I was also the laziest child. So as
mm.
I got older, he said, you know, who would have thought that our like laziest child who didn't want to do anything ever, like I couldn't walk. I always wanted to get pushed in the stroller till I was like 8. Like that I would end up choosing something that was so physical, and that's the thing that I became really passionate about doing, and then eventually teaching.
That's
And
awesome.
this is kind of going forward, but I was given a lot of opportunities to teach, I think, at a pretty young age. I'm sure we'll talk about
Mm.
this more, but with CCDT and as being part of a repertory company from a really young age and repeating works, I was often given a lot of opportunities to teach phrase work and to teach material and to already start to, I think I knew when I was 14 that I already loved that. Like
Yeah.
that feeling of responsibility and leadership and being
Yeah.
able to share and see
Right.
how the way that I was offering things was being translated by other people. And
Yeah, this is like a really nice segue. So, for the many people out there who I'm sure have no idea what CCDT
mhm,
is, this is Canadian Contemporary Dance Theatre, which when we were kids was called Canadian Children's Dance Theatre.
mhm,
Regardless, when we're saying CCDT, that's what we mean.
mhm,
You were taking classes as a kid there, kind of through the school, but there's
mhm,
also as you get more serious there, it's sort of a different model. Can you
mhm,
talk a little bit about what that is?
mhm. So CCDT was founded in 1980 by the co-founders and directors Deborah Lundmark and Michael DeConnick Smith. And their vision was to create a performing company for young artists that was different from what was offered out there, which at many studios was primarily training, examinations, and obviously the rise of competitive studios, which
Yeah.
were fewer and farther between back then, but obviously now are a big part of the accessibility of dance just in the world.
Hmm.
Um, so they wanted to create something that was more performance based, really focused on creativity and artistry and giving young people under the age of 19 the opportunity to perform in front of a general public and to collaborate with professional choreographers and to really have a full kind of company experience at a young age. And just kind of like proving that young people, I think, are really capable of that and of understanding what that is. Um, so in the early days of the company, I think there was just one company for a long time where anyone from ages 8 until teen years were just part of the company. And then over the course of the last 40 years, there have been some additional kind of tiers brought in. So Arwen Carpenter, who was a member of the company for many years and then a teacher there, and she was one of my first modern teachers, developed 2 apprenticeship programs. So currently, the way CCDT works is that you can audition for these professional programs as young as age 8. The Young Apprentice program is usually dancers around ages 8 to 11. Then there's a middle tier called the Core Apprentice program for dancers approximately 11 to 14. And then the older dancers, usually more in their teenage years, are members of the full performing company. And so
Hmm.
with age, by the time you get to the company, those dancers are training for usually about 20 to 25 hours a week, um, which includes repertoire rehearsals and new creations, and then touring and performing about 30 shows a year.
Yeah, it's an incredible model, and actually hearing you describe it makes me realize just how totally cool it is.
Yeah.
I,
And I
I
do
think
think,
I take for granted because that's how we grew up, but
yeah,
it
and that's what we knew, and that, I agree. And I think, I definitely know of many of other youth programs that are doing incredible things for young people and for young artists. But from what I have kind of heard and experienced and encountered, I do think that Deborah and Michael created something that is quite unique
Hmm.
in structure,
Hmm.
model of it.
Um, yeah, I think we're going to get into that, I hope, in a little bit more specificity.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the training and you mentioned repertoire rehearsals, but what's actually happening in the dance technique classroom for the dancers at CCDT? Or you could think about this another way. How did you train basically growing up through CCDT?
Mhm. Um, so at the studio, there are recreational classes in many, many genres, but the main
Hmm.
basis of training in the company is RAD Ballet and Limon Modern. RAD being the Royal Academy of Dance Ballet, which comes out of London, England, and is a very codified ballet methodology. We do examinations there, which are encouraged for most of the dancers, and is syllabus based.
Hmm.
Um, then the lineage of the Limon modern technique at CCDT has, I'm trying to think of where to start. So Donna Krabnow, who we often just talk about all the time, Donna came to CCDT in the late 1980s, I believe, was when Deborah and Michael met her, and she had come from training in New York and teaching in New York. And she was the one that first began to share Limon technique with the CCDT dancers in their training. And it has been part of the fabric of the company ever since. So Donna's work has a syllabus to it that she derived based on the work of Danny Lewis, who was her teacher, and Danny was a longtime member of the Limon company and worked with Limon himself. So that's kind of how things have come down. And then there have been other teachers since, people like me who trained with Donna, also Arwen Carpenter, Jordana DeVoe, other artists and teachers who I've worked with and who have taught me that I've learned through Donna. And yeah, again, her class is a progressive syllabus that starts as young as age 8 and starting to involve more complex principles of the technique and the work, and eventually builds it to a very advanced level and incorporates a lot of the Limon repertoire into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about how much I love syllabus. Like, to me, I find
I was hoping we'd talk about this.
Yeah, like I just think it's an incredibly valuable way to train. I think there's something really obviously important about repetition and about delving into something over and over again. And as Donna used to say, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent, which I think about a lot.
Me too.
But it's something that I try to impart on dancers as well. You know, if you don't know the exercise or what you're doing, you don't have the space to think about how you're executing it and how you're approaching it. And it's the same even with rehearsing repertoire and learning a dance, that it's like you add the nuance, you can delve into the work more once you have an understanding of what it is. And I think that with syllabus work, it's very much the same.
Yeah.
And there's also really clear progression. As a teacher, I appreciate it because I kind of know where I'm going to start and what things are going to build up to lead to where we want to go.
It provides structure for you as an educator too.
Yeah, for sure. So in addition to that, just in going back to the CCDT thing, so there's a lot of syllabus, obviously, with the RAD and the Limon Modern, but built into that structure, at least for the company dancers who do, I think, 6 or 7 technique classes a week. There's always a free ballet class, so something that's open, something that's non-syllabus based once a week. And on the weekends, there are also guest modern and contemporary teachers on a regular basis. So currently, as the rehearsal director, I usually try to book guest teachers in for 2 classes at a time if I can, depending on our schedule and their schedule, so that the dancers have they have their codified techniques and their syllabus that they're building upon week. And every week, they're also getting new information brought into them, and that's allowing them to discover new ways of movement, get new ideas, become more versatile dancers. And then that also, you know, the goal is that strengthens their ability to step into creative process with different kinds of choreographers.
That's amazing. Can you talk to me about what you think the Limon technique specifically teaches well? Why is it valuable still? Sorry.
I will have to say that, I mean, like, disclaimer, I have not danced with the Limon company.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, nor have I.
And definitely, like, my lens of the Limon work has come primarily through Donna.
Yes.
At CCDT, we also run a summer program, which is affiliated with the Limon company. And so every summer, I think I did 8 or 9 sun dances. I did many of CCDT Summer Intensive. Every summer, we also had a different Limon teacher, usually someone who was from the company or an alumni of the company. But most of my understanding of the work, and definitely the lens through which I teach, is from Donna's work. So I really, really appreciate the value of the emphasis on anatomy and like anatomical safety. And I think
about Donna saying, I'm not going to give you another correction until you start using your turnout.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, I don't know how much of that comes from Donna herself or the work, or I'm sure
Yes.
it's a hybrid of
Right.
both, but that I think there was so much, because the principles are so based on energy, on movement, on breath, on things that are not necessarily aesthetic
Yeah. Yeah.
in like
Yeah.
a structural sense,
Yes. Yeah.
that you don't have to look a certain way to do it. You know, it's not about like the height of your leg or matching a line. It's about how you adapt those principles and ideas into your body, which in my belief is how all dance should be, but is
Yeah.
not always how it is perceived in other techniques or in other ways of teaching. So I think, yeah, I really love that. And yeah, there's so much emphasis on musicality in the work, like
Mm.
so
Yeah.
much. And I think that comes from Limon himself and his interest in movement's relationship to music. Um, I don't know. I'm like spinning in my head of like all the things that I could say.
That's okay.
I also
I think you've done that.
I find
That's
this
great.
word a bit, I don't want to say it's overused in dance. I'll try to explain further, but it is really, I find Limon technique very organic. And I
Yeah.
find that that's a very broad term to use, and we can say
Yes.
that many
Yeah.
things are organic. But I do think that there, a lot of the principles appeal to anyone. It's why you can teach it to
Mm.
children. Like children understand the feeling of falling, the feeling of swing,
Right.
of rebound.
Right.
They're things that you see in the world and you understand. And I think they're sensations that people have all experienced in their lives, and now we're just finding a way to kind of access that and recreate that just using our bodies. And I love that. I think there's a sense of freedom in the movement. It never feels really restricted. Like I think it's a very liberating way of dancing and way of moving. And you can see it when you teach people too, um, whether it's children or professionals or adult beginners or whatever, people that
Yeah.
are, yeah, I think that people really connect with it. Also, and again, this might be more of a Donna teaching thing rather than the Limon technique itself, but in our training at CCDT, there was always a big element of improvisation that was,
Yeah.
so even up into the advanced levels, still trying to make sure that there was, you know, even 1 minute of improvisation at the end of class.
Right. Right.
And yeah, retaining that as part of the work and part of what is just valuable in the training.
Yeah. Um, I have so many questions. I'm going to try to ask you a couple more about you and
Mm-hmm.
your history, though. So, we had this Canadian education. We learned all about the Toronto dance scene, and you were
Mm-hmm.
embedded in that. Um, and then you ended up in the US.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work?
I want to go back just one moment, just because
Please.
I would be remiss to not mention that I also attended art schools as a kid.
Right.
I kind of
Yeah.
like didn't get to that point, but
Right.
before I was going to CCDT intensively, before I joined the Young Apprentice program, I I happened to get in, like I went to this audition for a school in Toronto that's called Claude Watson School for the Arts. I
Mm-hmm.
went just because a friend of mine was going, and his mom told my mom. She was like, go to this thing. I was like, okay. Just showed
Yeah.
up for this audition. They're like, sing these songs, do these dances. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. That program starts in grade 4, and I did
Okay.
all 5 years there, and I absolutely loved it. So I went to art school from literally age 9 until 22. Like
Yeah.
I've been in
And
art
now you're
school.
teaching in art school,
And now I'm
basically.
teaching in, yeah, now I'm teaching in
Right.
an art school. And it's funny, if you look at my grade 8 yearbook, the thing I wrote in
Yeah.
my blurb was, it was like a most likely to be, and I wrote a
Yeah.
teacher at this art school, which is kind of
Wow.
amazing. But yeah, so I just feel it's important to say that I attended Claude Watson for 5 years, and then I also continued in the dance program at Earl Hague Secondary School.
Yeah.
And then, so going back to then how I ended up in the States,
Yeah.
is like largely credited to you. um, I it's strange when I look back now in high school and realize how little I knew about what options were out there for dance. Obviously, I feel very
Mm-hmm.
fortunate that we became so, our network within the Toronto dance community, I think was quite extensive from our
Yeah.
experiences at CCDT and getting to work with a lot of guest teachers and choreographers and having a deeper understanding of what was going on there for being quite
Hmm.
young. Um, and because of that, I felt like I wanted to leave the city, not because I didn't think that there was valuable training or opportunities in Toronto for me, but more that I felt like I just wanted to experience something new, like a new community,
Yeah.
work with other teachers, experience other techniques that maybe weren't being offered in Toronto so commonly.
Yeah.
And also just because, when you're 18, you just like want to have an experience and like go somewhere. And my
Totally.
parents were very supportive and I'm like incredibly grateful for that. But I mean, I literally only auditioned for the schools that you auditioned for. Like I feel like I looked to the dancers that were older than me at CCDT and that I
Yeah.
saw pursuing dance and kind of took pages from their books
Hmm.
and back then there just wasn't as much on the internet about, you weren't going on social media and seeing what everyone was doing
Right.
and learning about all these programs. So I feel unless you really heard about it from someone, you kind of didn't really know what to look for. Maybe I just wasn't proactive enough into doing research at the time. I don't
Hmm.
know. I feel like I was like overly confident as a young person that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna dance. Like I'll figure it out.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
But can you talk a little bit about, was there some kind of a culture shock going to the States? Did you realize that there was uh, things that maybe American dancers had focused on or learned that you hadn't focused
yeah.
on or learned as a child?
Yeah. Well, I will say briefly that before I attended SUNY Purchase, which is our
Hmm.
college, um,
Yes.
I went to a conservatory in Virginia for a year,
Yes.
Shenandoah Conservatory, and I attended the dance program there. And I learned a lot there, and I absolutely value the experiences I had there. But I did realize partway through the year that I wanted to go to New York.
Mm.
Like I felt the program there was very small. It was a private university. I chose it for a multitude of reasons. I have family that lives in the state. Um, and it felt like what I wanted, the choice I wanted to make at that time, and that's what I did. But I did feel a calling to be a part of, I think, of where there was more dance happening. So I re-auditioned for Purchase and I transferred there the next year. And yeah, for sure. I mean, well, moving to the South is a huge culture shock
Yeah.
from Toronto, um, just generally speaking. And then going to Purchase, I remember being extremely intimidated by the classically trained dancers, or who
Yeah.
I felt was a classically trained dancer, because I think
Right.
we had really exceptional training, obviously, but it was, as part of a contemporary modern dance company, we were
Mm.
still dedicating more time to that kind of work, and we didn't perform classical works,
Right.
really, aside from outside of um, shows that I did at my performing arts high school. So that I remember my first ballet class freshman year at Purchase and like seeing, like the dancer like intimidation warm up. Like I remember seeing
Oh,
other
totally.
performers in
Yeah.
the ballet and being like, oh my God, like just doing things that I like never would have like done as a warm up, or just being like, oh my God, like look at these people's bodies. Like so that
Right.
that was definitely intimidating to see people coming from classical ballet schools.
Mm.
As I mean, I guess I've never gone to a post-secondary program in Toronto as a student, but
Yeah.
I felt like growing up, those schools were very much kind of insular in their own thing. And especially because CCDT was also very much its thing, and we were so engrossed in it, I didn't see a lot of what, someone my age might have been doing at one of the ballet schools.
Right. Right.
I think that was like the biggest thing for me, and feeling
Yeah.
whereas I think, and we used to talk about this, where I think a lot of our classmates, many of our classmates came in with like really, really rigorous classical ballet training and perhaps had less exposure to modern dance.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of the opposite, like in that, of
Totally.
course, we
Right.
had we had a lot of ballet training, but our modern was like so emphasized, and we'd spent so much time on it, and I felt much more comfortable in those classes in my first weeks and
Right.
months at Purchase, but felt like I was kind of like, oh, like I have some work to do in my ballet training.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how you were. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and not necessarily on my I really don't even think it was on my technique. I think we had really good technique, but just on like my aesthetic, I think
Yeah,
more
I
than
was just going to
anything.
talk about aesthetics.
Yeah, it
Because
was
I think,
really about aesthetic because I was like, my technique is good. Like I know
yeah,
I understand my body. I think I'm doing things safely. Like I'm relatively capable of dancing at an advanced level, but there's just a different. I was like, there's another layer now that I want to
yes,
get in my
yeah.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you were already sort of talking about how a lot of those Limon goals as a kid were not entirely aesthetic, and I really resonate with that idea that
Hmm.
you that maybe some of those American dancers had sort of an outside in training versus an inside out training, and how that was a whole different way of approaching your dancing or saying like, oh, I think about like houses that have curb appeal, right? Like
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
like I know that I have a good solid foundation, but maybe I need to make the external appearance just that much nicer.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
and
there's
it's just
value in that.
yeah, for sure. And it's just a different approach. I mean, when I always used to say this. Funny, I haven't really thought about this in a while, but um, I always used to think that I just kind of approached all dance and movement as how I understood modern dance and contemporary dance.
Mm-hmm.
Like even ballet, of course, like after having trained in it for so long and understanding the technique and the vocabulary, but still that kind of like final layer of aesthetic. I'm like, how can I see the way someone's moving and try to embody that? Or when I
Yeah.
was, as I, after graduating university and delving more into like street dance styles and how that's really fused with a lot of contemporary work and a lot of the performing I've done. I was like, I'm not good at hip hop, but I can look at what you're doing and try to
Right.
mimic the
Right.
choreography from my understanding in like my
Yes.
training. Um, yeah, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
That's great. Were there particular teachers at Purchase that you felt you really connected with as a student, or who you
Hmm.
really enjoyed the way that they taught?
Yes. Well, first of all, I will say you can edit this part out if it's too much of a
Yeah,
tangent,
of course.
but um, uh, so since you, as the first CCDT dancer to attend SUNY Purchase, there have been a long lineage of us ever since.
Yes.
The second, and then other friends of ours, and now many of the dancers that I am super fortunate to work with at CCDT, many have chosen Purchase to go on to pursue their BFA and to keep dancing. And two of our recent CCDT dancers are in this year's graduating class. And they sent
Wow.
me, it's probably a private link, but they sent me the video that the faculty made their class as part of their graduation since they didn't get to end their semester. And it was
Yeah.
like really, like I was very emotional looking at all of our old teachers and hearing them
Yeah.
speak. I mean, of course, there's been a huge turnover in a lot of the faculty, but many of our teachers are still there, and it was really nice
Mm.
to see that. Um, Megan Williams was certainly a big influence for me as a modern teacher and as she mentored my senior project as well. I think, I mean, of course, I felt very comfortable in her class because I will say, she's very, like, she has a lot of influence of Limon technique in what she teaches, and that felt
Yeah.
very comfortable and safe for me. And I loved what she emphasized in teaching and safety and technique and musicality and expression and the creativity of her exercises. And I loved, I don't think I even had her for that many semesters at school, but I always loved class with her.
Yeah.
Um, and she's someone that I've still kept in touch with in years
Yeah.
since. Um, Betty Jane Sills as a ballet teacher, and I
Yes.
love all the ballet faculty at Purchase, but there was something about class with BJ that I loved. BJ is a big one for musicality, and I very much appreciated that, and I appreciated that she was really clear with what she wanted, just in what she valued in technique and aesthetic, and that she could just say, like, to me, like, this is the alignment that I'm looking for, and like choreographically, like she really emphasized to the choreography of her exercises.
Mm.
Classic
I
DJ,
don't
like
remember that.
yeah, like when you do the pirouette en dedans, I need you to open your arms in second when you close in fifth. Like,
Mm.
please open your arms. Like that's what I need to see from you. And Rosanna was like that as well. Rosanna Saravalli. I remember my first class freshman year, her like stopping the music. She was like, I didn't give you an arm on the preparation. Because people would add something, just being very clear
Mm.
about this is what I'm asking you for.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I really love that. I'm trying to think. I mean, feels so long ago. Oh, of course, Jean Freebury, because
Hmm.
I had never experienced Cunningham before. Cunningham
Yeah,
very simply has little to no presence in Canada, as far as I
which is a
understand.
crying shame.
It is. It really, really is. I remember even asking Jean. She said in her, I think, 10 years performing with the Cunningham Company, she did like one show in Canada in something like
Mm,
10 seasons.
yeah.
Um, so I loved learning that work so much, and I loved the way that Jean taught it. And I think I'm pretty sure I took Cunningham every semester as soon as I could, like from second semester freshman year. And one nice thing about being home in this pandemic time is that I've been able to take some of those classes again through what
Mm.
the trust is offering on Instagram, and I love that. And I surprise myself with how much of the syllabus I remember. And again, syllabus class, like again, I
Yes.
love syllabus.
Yeah.
So
That's why I love
starting,
it too.
yeah, it's starting simple and then and building upon the things that are super just kind of like consistent, and then you build upon to, and especially with Merce's work, to then get to like crazy advanced, like literally impossible things that
Yeah.
sometimes the dancers are asked to do. I really, really love that and love Jean. And I mean,
So,
she's really the main Cunningham teacher I've ever had. So again, I just like,
mhm.
when I think of
And
Cunningham and how
once
it's been
again, a
run by
Canadian educator, right?
yes, yes, a fellow Canadian, the
I
one teacher who
wonder.
said my name properly in school.
Yeah, there's some linguistic challenges for Americans with Natasha. Um, we won't get into that in depth, although I'm sure we'd love to. Um, uh, okay, so you had this American dance experience, right? And
Hmm.
now you found yourself back in Canada for years, right? You ended up going back to Toronto and returning to CCDT.
Hmm.
Yeah, and in a teaching capacity. So how did all of that, how did your history of CCDT
Hmm.
and all these American teachers and lineages that you were exposed to, how does that all add up to the gumbo or the soup that is your
Yeah.
teaching nowadays?
Well, I feel like there's something important that I is maybe not completely relevant to this conversation, but I feel it's important for me to mention is that
Please.
one, one of the reasons, so shortly after finishing my senior project at Purchase, I studied abroad my junior year at
Yes.
Codarts, Rotterdam,
Yep.
which you had attended before you went to Purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it there, and I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to go back and do an internship with a company in
Mm.
Rotterdam as part of my senior year. The second half of my senior year, I spent back in Rotterdam, perform with Connie Jansen, and that was really great. And actually, the thing that brought me back to Toronto when that ended was that I was very much struggling with a really serious eating disorder, which had developed
Yeah.
when I was in university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, over, for many different factors, which I have done many years of treatment on since, and am in a much better place these days after many years, and obviously the support of friends and family. But that was kind of the thing that brought me back. Like I had no intention of
Mm.
moving back to Toronto at all. I had
Yeah.
my OPT visa. I had assumed I was like, I'm either going to stay in Europe or I'm going to go back to New York. Like there was no part of me that thought I was going to move back to Toronto at this point in my 22
Yeah.
year old life.
Yeah.
Um, but I ended up coming back because I was very unwell and very unhappy, and it just felt like the right thing to do. And I still, for the first year or two, was like kind of like one foot out the door. I was like, when am I going to go
Yeah.
back to New York? I was
Mm-hmm.
flying back. Once I went to New York, I think 7 times in 12 months, just going to auditions
Wow.
and going to see my friends and feeling like I didn't want to lose a hold of what I had in that
Yeah.
part of the dance community and in that part of the world. Um, so what ended up happening, what brought me to CCDT was that I had come home, I had entered into an outpatient program at Toronto General for eating disorders, which was the first step in a long line of treatment that I've done for the past decade. But I'm grateful to that experience and that it got me started. And part of the program there is no physical activity. It's just kind of
Okay.
one of the ground rules for all of the patients in the program is that you don't do any physical activity outside of daily things,
Yeah.
which was a welcome relief for me because I needed a break from dance and needed to focus on my health. And then when I was ending my time in the program there, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I don't think I should just move back to the States. It doesn't feel like the
Right.
right thing for me to do. I haven't been training for almost 3 months. I don't know if this is even really what I want to pursue in the same way that I felt I wanted to a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I happened to be out at dinner with a bunch of my old CCDT friends, and the former associate director and rehearsal director, Jordana DeVoe, had recently left the company. And I had heard about this, and one of my friends said, well, you know, Deborah hasn't hired anyone yet. And I literally, after that dinner, picked up the phone and called her and like left her a message at the studio. I was like, Deborah, this is Natasha. I don't know if you know, but I'm home in Toronto, and I heard you're looking for a rehearsal director, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested. And she called me back like the next day, and I remember going in, and she said, never in 1,000 years did I think you would be sitting in front of me telling me that you wanted this job. Because now I have to go back and tell another story. And some people who know me have heard the story, but when I think you had left CCDT already, but when I was maybe 16 or so, we were on tour somewhere doing a tech rehearsal one night on stage, and we're sitting on stage, and Deborah shouted my name from the house, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to tell me to stop talking because I'm always talking.
Right. Right.
And she said to me, she said, I hope you know that 10 years from now, you're going to be back here running this company for me.
Right.
And I laughed. Like, I thought it was like
Right.
the funniest joke. I
Right.
was like, 30 years from now, like, I'm going to go tour the world. I'm going to go do all these other things. But it's, you know, she was like 100% right.
Yeah.
And
She knew.
not that I didn't want to come back to CCDT. It just seemed like, I was like, 10 years from now, I'm going to be 25. Like, what?
Right.
Okay. So sorry, jumping back ahead.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
but that's, yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up working as a rehearsal director when I was 23, I think,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty young. And I feel super fortunate that it was a position that just happened to be available, and that I, I don't mean to make myself sound special, but I don't know how many people at age 30 can say that they've been a rehearsal director for 7 years or 8 years. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a long time that I've
You
been
already have
doing
tons
it.
of experience.
Yeah, that I've been doing it for, because I had this opportunity to work with a professional company of young artists, which I think gave me also a little more confidence in the
Yeah.
opportunity to start honing those skills from a younger age, because relative to those dancers, you know, I had a bit of a sense of, for myself, like a bit of a sense of authority
Right.
in building those skills and in building that relationship with them.
So how would you
Um,
describe your teaching style?
I I feel very, very greatly, I will say I feel the most influenced in my teaching style by the three main teachers I had growing up at CCDT more than anything, who
Yes.
are Donna Krasnow, Deborah Lundmark, and Georgina Hayball, who
Yeah.
we haven't spoken about yet, but Georgina was, you know, our longtime ballet teacher,
Yeah.
who are all very enthusiastic, very expressive, very loud teachers. And I mean,
Yeah.
that also is just in line with my personality. So
Totally.
I, I, I talk too much, arguably, as a teacher, both in terms of how much I want to give in terms of information and corrections. And I also, you know, I have a lot to say all the time. And I, yeah, I think, yeah, I try to be very expressive. I walk around the room a lot. I think especially when working with the more advanced dancers, to me, it's super important to like see all around, and especially because one of the other things that Donna really ingrained in the training there that I think the dancers don't even realize from a young age, but that I'm super aware of now, is that we never trained facing the mirror. Like,
Yeah.
we looked at the mirror in modern class as a tool for,
Yes.
you know, if we're looking at certain alignment things or like really
Yes.
using it as a specific tool, but otherwise we never faced the mirror. And even now, it's really strange for me to do that Limon work and to be able to
Facing a
see
mirror.
myself. It's very, I don't like that feeling of that. So I try to emphasize that as well. And I try to make class really interactive and participatory for the dancers. I like to ask a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I like for us to have conversations a lot. And I think that that's important for a multitude of reasons. If I'm guest teaching somewhere or with dancers I don't know as well, it helps me get to know them in terms of
Totally.
learning their names and what they understand, and like getting
What
to
do
know
you care about this work?
personalities.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you care about? What do you know? Also, personality wise, like who's willing to like take a guess? Who do I need to maybe give
Yes.
some more attention to because they're afraid and they're hiding?
Yeah.
And so that's really important to me to like kind of get to know them as people in the class. And then I also think it really helps um, with the. I'm thinking about the older dancers right now a little bit, but it also helps give them a bit of a sense of ownership of the work too, and of their
Hmm.
understanding of technique. And you know, one of my favorite things that I say that I think I'm sure they always kind of think is funny, but if I ask a question and there's someone who's been in the class for 3 years, I'm like, you can't answer this question. Like,
Right.
let someone
Right.
else think about it. And but
Yes.
they know what I'm going to say, and they kind of they have a sense of our common goals in the work. And then with much younger dancers, I think it's so important to have conversations with them. With the younger ones, like we always do interactive improvisations where I ask them like, you know, who can contribute a word that's going to help inspire us for our improvisation today. And
Yeah.
they're just like, I mean, if there's one thing I have learned, it's that kids, children love improvisation. They want to
Yeah.
free dance and they want to
Right.
express themselves, and it's like their favorite part of class, and to see them light
Mm.
up like that. So it's really, I find that so important to let them contribute and to make sure that they feel like they get to be themselves in the dance class. They're not just like being told what to do for 90 minutes and they don't get to speak.
That's so beautiful.
Within
This.
reason. Sometimes there are too
Yeah.
many questions. We have
Right.
rules
Right.
about how
Right.
many questions you can ask.
So you've sort of gotten at something in your last answer that I wanted to ask you about. It's been enlightening for me as I've gone to grad school and started to teach in a syllabus format or in a longer term format, right? Like a
Mhm.
10-week format. But you as an educator are faced with the idea or the task of teaching some of these dancers from the age of what, 8 to 18. And that is such a different way of thinking about what a comprehensive dance education looks like. How do you navigate a 10-year teaching role with a dancer?
Mhm. Well, I am still navigating it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, right.
You know, I didn't really start to teach more regularly at CCDT until my second year there. Until
Yes.
2013, 2014 is when I really started teaching on a regular basis. Um, and yeah, I feel a little bit like I've probably had a bit of a reverse trajectory for many teachers in that only now, probably in the past year, have I really started teaching professional level open classes, like for
Mm,
drop-ins or guest teaching for
yeah,
companies.
yes.
Most of what I've been doing is in this more kind of like long-term educational, you know, building relationships with students for long periods of time and dancers. Um, it's I feel like the first thing I'd want to say is just it is so rewarding. It is
Yeah,
like I truly love my job as a dancer and a dance teacher, but especially with CCDT. And part of that, of course, is very personal, having a long history there. But to see the dancers and what they accomplish year upon year and to see their growth is really, really incredible. And I also I feel like if you asked me from the outside and I didn't have like such an inside connection with it, I'd probably be like, you teach them the same thing for like 8 years in a row? Like
yeah, I know.
from the outside it seems weird to me, but I think I have some confidence having been on that side of it. And
Yes,
for
yes.
me, and maybe not for every dancer who's gone through CCDT or something similar, like I loved it. I loved going back to the simple things at the beginning of the year, and I loved how it progressed, and I loved being able to revisit the combination that we did 12 months before with a better understanding of it,
Hmm.
and better understanding of my body, and you know, gaining more confidence. Because when I was 12 taking advanced modern, I literally used to sit in my car like on the way to the studio like so nervous about how challenging class is going to be, and then
Mm,
you know, moving through that to gain more confidence. So I think my experience of it helps me have more confidence in its value, and in how
yes.
the dancers are receiving that experience from their end. Um, and I mean, in the structure of what we're doing at CCDT, obviously there are some different levels in the classes, but you do get dancers who take the advanced class for 5, 6 years in a row. Um,
And you must set different goals for them, right?
yeah, for sure. I think that's something that is, I think in a way, which is not always the best course of action, but I feel like at CCDT with the company and the rigor of the training and the level of the dancers and also the composition of the company being usually at least 2/3 to 3/4 returning members who have had
Yes.
at least 1 year of training with the company, then with a smaller influx of new dancers, that to an extent in the advanced level, my approach is to teach to the strongest level, to the
Mm-hmm.
strongest members of the class, which I don't think is always appropriate depending on the situation.
Yes.
Like
Right.
obviously if you have one dancer that is ready for much more, but the others aren't, it's not going to be valuable
Yeah.
to teach to that one person when everyone else is maybe floundering or not getting the information
Right.
they need. But I think in the context of those advanced classes in which those
Right.
dancers might be taking it year upon year upon year, part of it is a little bit like throwing them into the fire. And
For
I
sure.
don't, and knowing obviously that they're going to be safe, that they have the technical
Yeah.
foundation to, not totally injure themselves, and to give, I do my best obviously to give everyone individual attention at some point or
Mm-hmm.
multiple points in class. I try to be cognizant of that. I don't know how successful I am. Um, but knowing that part of it is that they work at the pace that they need to, and that
Mm-hmm.
they will eventually rise to meet the level of the most advanced dancers in the class.
Yeah, and that makes me think of the fact that in the end, this is a dance company, right? Like
Mhm.
you're asking them, there's a show coming, there's rep that needs to be done. Like we sort of need you to get there in time
Mhm.
for the show. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the teaching challenges that being a rehearsal director uh, that you face as a rehearsal director. How is that different from teaching in a classroom,
Mhm.
in a dance classroom or in dance technique?
Mhm. I I mean, I definitely have to like I love rehearsal direction. I really do. And that I
Yeah.
think something that I probably knew I would love more than just like teaching itself from a young age. Like
Yes.
um I think challenges in rehearsal directing have more to do with, not to say that the goals are less clear, but the goals are much more varied in
Yeah.
that if I'm teaching this kind of codified Limon technique that has a set syllabus and has like a much clearer direction, and I can be very
Yes.
clear in class on a regular basis about what we're working
Yes.
towards. Whereas in repertoire, if
Right.
we're doing 5 different pieces, the goals in each work are often quite different in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what's important, and what's important in one work is maybe not so important in the next, and that depends on the style of movement, the composition of the piece, the choreographer and what they care about, and then of course what I kind of put on top of that, which is like I'm like always big on cleaning. Like anyone who works with me
Yeah.
is about that, and that's also why people like choreographers that I work with independently, like hiring me, because they hate cleaning their dances. But that's like my favorite thing to do,
Right.
because I love detail and I love specificity and I love to talk
Yes.
about those minute things that I think really like can polish a work when it's appropriate for that
Right.
work.
Right.
Um, yeah, so sometimes it's it's being able to communicate those things that, and I think this is really interesting for young dancers in that I really try to emphasize, not constantly, but from time to time, that what I'm sharing with you and what I'm asking of you is not like the baseline bottom line of like all everything to do,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's something that's like really like, yeah, don't land a jump with like your knees rolling forward like you're gonna hurt yourself.
Right. Right.
Unless it's something like
Right.
that, I'm like, I'm sharing, this is from a certain perspective, this is to do with
Right.
this technique also taught from this perspective. If you take a class with someone
Right.
from the Limon company, it's not going to be the same thing, and they're going to ask for different things and describe things differently. And in just because I'm asking you to move in this way doesn't mean it's the only way to move at all.
Right. Right.
And so in the repertoire, sometimes that is a bit of a hurdle, is, there's something that we've been working so hard on in class, and suddenly I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not what
Right.
we
Right.
want
It's
anymore. That's
different.
not what, yeah, it's a different thing.
Right.
And so being able to teach the skill of like drawing from all these things that we're learning in different contexts, in ballet, in modern, in contemporary, in the rep, from different teachers,
Right.
and learning to be versatile and take what you need when you need it, and allow those ideas to kind of translate between the borders.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So there's
Yeah. No,
definitely,
I think you're.
yeah, there's definitely that. That is something in terms of teaching. There was something else I was going to say before, but now I forget what it was.
I have a question that might be less fun
Yes.
to answer for you. What do you think you struggle with as a teacher? You seem,
Oh.
I think you're naturally good at it, but there must be things that you think about, oh man, I did it again, or I love
Mhm.
how this teacher can do that, but I don't seem to be able to do that in my
Mhm.
classroom. What are your challenges?
I am, like, newsflash, I'm super verbose, and that can be really detrimental at times. Because although
Yeah.
I'm not great at my time management sometimes, I've definitely improved. Like, I feel like the first
Yes.
couple years that I taught, I was like, okay, now we have like 3 minutes to jump. Like, I
Right,
had a
right.
really hard time pacing things, and also both in terms of how I was speaking and in kind of understanding uh, how much the dancers needed, in terms of like, I don't have to review the exercise 3 times before you do it. And
Yeah, right.
so that is a challenge. One thing I really, really struggle with, that I want to improve upon, but I find it really hard, is um, knowing how much information to give when.
Yeah.
So I remember, for example, once being in a class that Donna was teaching back when I was dancing with CCDT, and there was a newer member of CCDT, and it was quite early on in the year, and she had had this dancer demonstrate something, and said something to the effect of, "Do you see how well she's coordinating her torso with her arms?" And we all acknowledged it, like, yes. And she said, "Does anyone know why I'm not bothering her about the fact that her knees aren't tracking over her toes?" And it was essentially because that was a less important thing for her to be emphasizing at that point. She was like, I want her to focus on her
Mm-hmm.
coordination and on her musicality and the movement of her upper
Hmm.
body. And yes, I see that her lower body is not perhaps aligning in the way that we need it to, but that comes secondary right now. And that's something that I
Hmm.
really struggle with. And I feel bad, because I've had teachers who look at you and demand 7 things at once, and they need to see it all
Yes.
integrate, or
Yeah.
you're not doing it properly. And I know how that feels. And
Yeah.
I definitely am culprit to being that kind of demanding on dancers,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or that I say, I'll be like, okay, we're going to do this exercise, and this is the one thing we're going to focus on. And then we do
Yes.
it, and I
Right.
just
Right.
start spewing new information at them as they're doing it, because
And you're
I
like, I didn't
feel,
even ask for that.
I know, and
Right.
I told you we were only going to focus on the musicality, and now I'm talking about your alignment, and like, so that's definitely something I struggle with.
Hmm. It's
I
almost
also
like the
don't,
idea of like, is this going to be on the test?
yeah, yeah. So that's hard for me, and it's a strength and a weakness. I hear from a lot of the dancers that I'm very detail oriented,
Yeah.
and and I see many things, and that can be good, and sometimes in a teaching context I feel like I need to improve on like seeing things and kind of like filing it away for like later.
Right. Right.
But I don't know, and I think there have been times that I've tried to get better at like taking notes after class and like remembering the things I spoke to people about, and I just haven't been able to like fall into that practice. It doesn't feel natural for me. Like, I'll
Hmm.
try and it'll last for like 2 weeks, and then I just go back to like relying on my memory and like visual things.
Right.
So
Right.
no, I'm working on that. And then I want to say the other thing I am continuing to want to really hone is the way I communicate with musicians and the accompanists that I
Yes.
work with.
Okay.
I CCDT is super fortunate that we have live music for all of our ballet and modern classes, and I love all the accompanists that we work with. They're very talented both musicians and composers and as dance accompanists, and most of them are extremely experienced. Some of the ones I teach
Yeah.
with now played for classes when we were dancing there. You know, they've been doing this
Yeah.
for decades. And it's both really important to me to include them in the class. Like when
Yeah.
I make a point to introduce the accompanist if it's a guest thing, or
Right.
to say, you know, make sure that the dancer said good morning or hello to whoever it
Right.
is, and trying to, you know, ask them to play things if I need to hear it again, or, you know, get the dancers to ask them questions or ask them if they observe
Mm.
something, and just really like include them as part of the class. Because I think
Yeah.
that that was also done a lot by our teachers to really
Hmm.
involve the accompanists. And I with several of them who I have a kind of longer relationship with, I've also asked them, you know, like, or sometimes after class I'm like, I'm so sorry that I didn't like any tempo I gave you today was not correct, like having to
Right.
adjust
Right.
it, you know, 8 measures in,
Yeah.
and say, sorry, we need to slow down,
Totally.
and like acknowledging that like sometimes I'm not doing a good job with
Yeah.
the musicians. And so that's something that I want to improve upon in terms of continuing to like find ways to involve them, be better at communicating what I need in terms of instrumentation, quality, time, like
Right.
tempo,
Right.
and then yeah, and just like, I don't know, yeah, just being a better communicator in that way, because the
Hmm.
music component is so important to me in class. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a multitude of other things. If you asked any of my dancers or students
Right.
like bad
Right.
at, they can tell you like 500 other things that I'm not good at. So,
I think that's a window into your perspective on yourself, I guess. But I have a question that's a little bit maybe strange, but it's one that I'm really interested in. Can you talk about what it looks like in a classroom when the students are sort of like in it, when they're
mm,
doing the things that you want them to be doing, when they're, what does that look like for you when maybe you have a moment of thinking like, oh, I'm doing it and they're doing it because
mhm,
I set it up properly, you know?
mhm.
Can you talk about that?
The thing that comes to mind most quickly is definitely facilitated by the progression of class. So like when I think of that, obviously as we move farther along in the course of the year, the season, when I'm working with the company and we build upon the syllabus and things become more set, that's when I really start to
Mm-hmm.
see things come together, because those dancers have an understanding of what we're doing. They know the
Mm.
exercises, and they're starting to
Mm.
really integrate their technique and their abilities in a very sophisticated and mature way. So I'm able, you know, especially in the first part of the class that we teach, it becomes pretty much solid after the first maybe third of a year that it's the most advanced of the floor work. And I essentially am watching and just guiding them through it.
Right, right.
And that I can see their focus in it. Yeah, there's certain, I just, it's hard for me to not think of specific examples, but
Yeah.
there are certain moments, and I love seeing the way that they move through transitions.
Mm.
And I think that's really important to me when I start to see the dancers valuing the things outside of the exercise themselves. So when I
Yes.
see
Yeah.
that, something that often shocks me sometimes when I go and guest teach at other institutions, which have different rigors of training and different levels of training, is the need to ask dancers to be ready to move.
What do you mean by
Like,
that?
so that if I have taught the exercise and we're about to hear the musical introduction, I'm about to count them in, that unless I say something, they're like,
Mm.
you know, they're not ready to dance.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I think maybe was instilled in us or just set by example for so long. So to see things like that I'm, you know, even before I count the introduction, that the dancers are ready and they're present, that they can finish an exercise and they
Yeah.
stay engaged and stay on stage. You know, like I tell the little ones, you know, the curtain's still open. Like
Right.
you need to still be there. And then I promise in 5 more seconds, I'll tell you can rest and fix your hair.
Right.
And
Right.
so seeing moments like that, seeing them stay so engaged from the
Mm.
start of the exercise to the end, especially with the younger ones, is super rewarding, because I think it's a different level of attention for someone who's 9.
Right.
You have to stay focused in this one dance exercise for a minute and a half straight.
I remember my Pilates teacher saying that she took so much joy when I was in Mark's company, just watching people focus for 90 minutes, like really just be deeply in their practice. And it sounds like you're sort of saying some of that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely a thing. And then also, like I said, I talk a lot, and sometimes that's like, I take social breaks a lot in class, like not to go on long tangents, but sometimes I have stories that I want to share.
Right, right.
They are super relevant to like dance education or not, but sometimes, that happens. And so I also like to see that, of course, as focused as the dancers are and as present as they are, that they're also having a good time. Like that's
totally
the other thing, and the music also contributes to that. And so I think there's usually a pretty clear sense when that energy is there versus if it's a day that they're like dragging themselves through it, or that, not everyone is kind of present in the room that day. But yeah, there are moments when like everything just like magically comes together and you can feel it was a good class. And that also has to do with my preparation.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
If I come in and I'm like really ready to go and I feel I managed my time well and I'm giving the information really well, that definitely like it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And of course my goal should be to do that all the time. And
right.
sometimes things just like take a left turn and other things happen, or sometimes you figure out something else that needs to be focused on that day.
Totally. And that's the beauty of that long-term education too, is you're like, we can take this half an hour or this day-long diversion because we're going to get back to it.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I have some questions for you in light of teaching during COVID-19. How are you still teaching those dancers at CCDT?
Yes,
and
I am.
Are you finding it challenging to maybe buoy their spirits or provide inspiration for them when maybe you aren't feeling it yourself? And how are you doing that?
So we've been closed since mid-March.
Yeah.
And of course, we've decided that the studio will remain closed for the rest of the term, and the company had all of its touring and performances canceled.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's been disappointing. I mean, obviously there's been time to process it. Like this coming weekend would have been our performances. Friday would have been opening night of kind of our big end of season performances, which was also the company's 40th anniversary, which has just been postponed until next year. So next season will be a big 40th anniversary celebration. So we're already moving forward with that. But pretty quickly, I mean, funny, I had never heard of Zoom until like and now I'm on it every single day for hours a day. Pretty quickly, we moved into online classes. So it's a mix of the school of CCDT, so the studio, which has recreational students in it, and then obviously members of our company and professional programs, and then the company itself. So I have been teaching online actually quite a lot, kind of voluntarily. It's helpful for me, my life and my mental health and my schedule, to have something to do 6 days out of the week.
Yes.
I like getting up and saying, okay, even if it's just for 1 hour today, there's some place that I have to be and something that I have to do.
Yes.
And also feeling fortunate that it's something that involves physical movement, because I have definitely felt my motivation to keep dancing waning in over the past 2.5 months. Like the first month I was like online taking all these classes with people, and the second month I was like, well, I guess I'll just teach today. So yes, I've been teaching like 6 classes a week, I think. 6, like quite a bit. And of course, we can't enforce attendance because it's not like a course thing, and we have to acknowledge that all the dancers, especially as younger people, have very different home situations with parents and siblings, and how much space they have and how many devices they have that can access the internet.
Right.
There are like a multitude of things that we're needing to take into consideration. But I feel good that we're doing them. There are a handful of dancers who are very, very consistent in their attendance because they're able, and I think it's helpful to
Yeah.
give them something to do for the ones that are able to. And in terms of morale, once a week on Sundays, we still do kind of like a check-in where we all just like hang out on Zoom and just talk about how our
Nice.
week is going and have a moment just spend some time together. And it's especially good for the ones who aren't able to take any classes because of
Yeah.
their home situation. So we just all get to see each other
Yeah.
and make sure
You know,
everyone's doing okay.
it's interesting. I feel like one of the themes that you keep coming back to is this idea of dance kind of being a place where people can just come together and talk and be social, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, given the fact that the field feels like it's in so much flux, and I'm sure there are some dancers that you're teaching that want to be professional dancers, and but there must but their futures might be unknown right now, and there's other dancers that in CCT who probably don't have the desire to go on and dance professionally.
Hmm.
So, what do you think a good dance education provides outside of preparation for trying to enter the field as a professional? Like, what's happening outside of that
Hmm.
that you think is vital or rewarding or important?
Well, the interesting thing about this is that I've also read many other people's opinions on this recently because
Oh,
we've been
cool.
on the CCD company's blog, we've been reaching out to alumni to answer these questions and share. And
Yeah.
you did that for us recently, which we loved. And so I've been able to read what a lot of former CCDT dancers have been able to share. Obviously, most of
Yeah.
these people are still working in dance and in the arts that we've been reaching
Mm-hmm.
out to. But I also still have a lot of really close friends who I danced with at CCDT, and many of whom are not pursuing dance professionally. And I think I don't know. I don't want to sound like basic, but it's things like understanding commitment
Yeah.
and dedication and working as part of a team. Really, like teamwork is so important in collaboration, both with your peers and with directors and guests. And I think really understanding professionalism, we really
Mm.
emphasize that there's a level of professionalism that we demand from the dancers kind of even when they're at a really young age. We have some that are
Yeah.
apprentices when they're 12 or 13. And, I tell them, like, of course, we involve the parents in conversations when it's necessary. But I'm like, you know what? If you're sick, you can send me an email or you can
Right.
practice calling the studio or,
Right.
if you have a conflict with something, like you can come and speak to me about it in person. And then, we can talk to your parents about it as well if we need to. But
Right.
really starting to encourage them to advocate for themselves,
Yes.
which I think is really important. And nowadays, I feel like that's in the form of me constantly telling them that they need to answer their emails. Like wherever you go, you guys need to like answer your emails. Like if I ask you a question, you should respond within a couple
Right.
days.
Right.
Um, but yeah, all of those things. I think one of the things that we've been talking about so much among the other directors and staff at CCDT is resilience,
Mm.
especially in even before the whole coronavirus thing. We've been experiencing like a lot of young dancers, I think, struggling more with their mental health and
Yeah, for sure.
with juggling many things. And of course we could talk about the rise of social media and like all these other things that have played into that, but
Hmm.
definitely seeing that I think young people have in a way like more or different challenges to contend with than what I remember experiencing, and wanting to also help give them the skills to move through that, whether or not it's in a
Yeah.
dance context, um, of how to kind of meet perceived failures and move forward from them, and for lack of a better expression, that life is not always fair, and that, as we operate as a professional company, there are auditions and there is casting and there are disappointments and there are
Right.
things that you're going to have to work harder for forever in your life that the person next to you will never have to work hard on.
Right. Right.
And and I don't know. So like many things like that that I hope are really that I believe are really helpful skills for anyone
Yeah.
in life. And I think that that's what people take from it, and I've heard from many former dancers, both our peers and then dancers that I've trained, that they still very much value the experiences that they had here. And it's also pretty cool to be like 19 and be like, I danced with a professional company for 4 years. You
Totally.
know? Yeah.
So I have just one last question for you. And, you mentioned that you think that dancers now face different challenges than we did when we were training.
Hmm.
So given the fact that you have access to this history of teaching and this historical Limon rep, but you also look to the work that you're doing in street styles and contemporary work right now that as a dancer informs your teaching, how do you think about honoring your past and also sort of preparing dancers for a changing field? What do they need to know now that we didn't need to know?
Hmm.
That's a long, kind of complicated
Yeah,
question.
well, I mean, there is so much. Like I tell the dancers all the time, I think something that I really try to emphasize for them is the importance of the foundation, whether or not it is in the way that we teach the syllabus. But I think with the influx of information and resources that we have these days with the internet and especially with
Yes.
social media, that like, if I go on CCDT's Instagram and I go to I don't even know, the general feed, it's like it's pictures and videos of people doing insane things with their bodies in dance,
Right.
which is
Right.
all like incredibly admirable, but it's like that's all people are seeing now is the 500
Right.
pirouettes and the 180-degree legs and the
Mm-hmm.
tricks and the abilities, and that I worry that a lot of the focus is being drawn away from the work and from the process and from the
Yeah.
simple things. And if I can go back and reference the interview you did with Aaron, which I loved, when he was talking about his
Thank
first year
you.
at Juilliard and just saying how much he just indulged in like getting back to the basics, like foundation, technique,
Yeah.
like flow, and I really value and appreciate that as well. But I think sometimes now with younger dancers and kind of the culture of dance commercially and globally, they're not seeing as much of that, or
Right.
if it isn't being emphasized to them in their training, what they're seeing and the information being given to them in the world glazes over that part completely,
Yeah.
and they want to go from where they are immediately to the tilt or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
I mean, I feel like tilts are like not even cool anymore. I'm sure there's other
We're dating ourselves with our dance tricks.
the kip up into a split. So yeah, so I feel like I really want that for young dancers and for the people I teach to understand the value in that, and that having all of that foundation and all of that knowledge and understanding um, is going to make you a stronger, better dancer with a longer career,
Yeah.
and hopefully also give you more tools and the assets that you need in order to achieve some of those things if that's what you are interested and invested in. Um, but I tell the dancers all the time, because I find it's hard for me balancing both as a rehearsal director and as the associate director, because I work with Deborah and Michael on commissioning choreographers and looking at kind of who we want to
Mm-hmm.
program and what works we want to include in the season, is providing them with that versatility and wanting the dancers to have varied experiences and to be very versatile in their abilities, but without losing the emphasis on their foundation and their technique. Because, okay, this is like going to be a sidebar. I promise I won't talk about it for too long. But I was just thinking the other day about how I feel that we've come to undervalue the people who become really, really good at one thing. Like that
Mm.
it's not enough to just be like really good at classical ballet. You also have to be able to do like the neoclassical
Right.
and to do the ohad work and to do
Right.
the this thing,
Right.
and that it's like, oh, can we not commend the fact that this like beautiful dancer in the Martha Graham company is like like a master of this technique,
Yeah.
and that
Right.
it shouldn't be undervalued that they can't just go and step in and do a work by
Right.
some other choreographer.
Right.
So I want our dancers to be capable to have that versatility, but to also like have them know that it's okay if something is not like your jive, and
Your
it's
forte,
okay.
right?
Yeah, and that's totally fine. And sometimes needing to slow them down when, they're
Mm,
saying, oh, like we really want to do this, or like there's the summer program that I really want to take, that blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, and I see that that is absolutely valuable, and I agree with you, and I think that'll be good for your training. But also, right now you're 15, and I think
right,
it's okay that we can spend some time really allowing you to integrate and invest in this part of your training. And like, I didn't do any street dance or anything beyond until I was like 23. And I tell them that
right.
a lot of the ways that they're moving now and the skills that they have are things that we could not have even dreamed of when we were 16. The way that the
100%.
dancers move on the floor. Even, I don't think I'd done a dance in socks until I was like, I don't even know if I did a sock dance at Purchase.
Right.
And like and not just, that's just like a bit of a tangent example, but there are things that have changed in the world of contemporary dance a lot that are really wonderful and beautiful, and the world is expanding, and techniques and styles are colliding and fusing, and that's creating so much more work and possibility in it. But at the same time, I still, I want the dancers to get there in a way that is both like safe and intelligent, and know that there's no rush
Yeah.
to do all of that. I can't even remember what the original question was, or if this even answered
No,
it.
you've answered it. You've answered it really beautifully, and I won't do you the disservice of trying to paraphrase what you just said. But so that's all I have for you today, and I just want to thank you for this. It's
Thank you for
wonderful to
having
hear your
me.
thoughts.
Like I said, I was like an like embarrassing level of excited and to
You know,
talk to
I
you.
was.
Even now, I'm going back and I'm like, oh, I didn't talk about that. And I didn't mention
I
that
know.
person.
I know these things don't end up the way that you think they're going to, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time, and I think you're a wonderful mind and a wonderful heart and a wonderful educator, and I just thank you for sharing this.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I mean, you also need to know that I've learned so much of what I know as a dancer from you, as one
Oh,
of my
that's
peers
really
and
kind of
someone
you.
that I looked up to, and my mentor when I was an apprentice back in the day.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
appreciate that. So have a nice day, and I'll see
Thank
you when I
you.
see you when this is all
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.